JavaScript has introduced a new feature which is called an arrow function. It is sometimes also called a fat arrow function. So if you simply Google arrow function Mozilla or fat arrow function Mozilla, you're going to get the documentation of that particular feature. So let's take a look on what that arrow function really is. So to get started, let's look at our documentation of functions. And we already know that we have two flavors of functions. We have the function declaration, which is written like such, and we have function expression, which is written like such. So this is the function declaration slash function statement style, function name of the function, takes parameters or doesn't take parameters, that's optional, and it does something. A function expression is simply usually an anonymous function and it's actually assigned to a variable. So let's say b in our case. So this function and this function is exactly the same, but you already know from our videos on hoisting that they hoist differently, but functionally they are the same. Now the third flavor of a function is actually the arrow function or the fat arrow function. So let's look at our documentation over here and see what is the difference in this arrow function. So let's start reading. Over here it says an arrow function expression has a shorter syntax than a function expression. So we're going to just stop here. So a thing that I noticed is that I Googled I Googled arrow functions and the title is also the same, but over here it says an arrow function expression. That gives me some information. It basically is telling me the first sentence, just till here, is telling me that an arrow function and a function expression are kind of the same thing. So I'm going to basically make a copy of this and I'm going to make this into a fat arrow function. And fat arrow function and a function expressions are exactly the same, but with a different syntax. So it has a fat arrow. So basically, you're not going to use the function word, the keyword. You're not going to have that. And over here, you're going to basically have an arrow. That's it. And that's an arrow function expression. So I'm going to just type in over here, arrow function expression. So now a good question you may have is that, is there something like an arrow function statement or arrow function declaration like such? And the answer is no. The arrow functions are basically expressions, function expressions, and they're written like such. And they don't have any other difference. The main reason for that is that they are just in a shorter syntax and it's faster to write. That's pretty much it. Now, there's more to that. So I'm going to just save this and actually I'm going to call this C. So function A, function B, function C. So that's the first part of it. Let's read a little bit further. So back to our docs. And over here, it says that an arrow function expression has a shorter syntax than a function expression and does not have its own this, arguments, super, or the new target. So basically, so far, we have not learned about this keyword, we have not learned about the super, new, dot target, but we do have learned about the arguments, right? So we know that functions get a special keyword called arguments. So if I just do arguments like such, this keyword is going to capture all the arguments that this particular function receives. So if I simply try to log this and log this over here as well and try to execute all of these functions. So A, B, and C, and if I save and refresh, I'm gonna make this big. So you see the arguments did get printed on line number 3, 8, but on line number 13, which is over here, it says, hey, arguments is not defined. So that's the major difference in a fat arrow function expression versus a function expression, is that it does not have these features. Make sense? And this is a big difference. So as long as your functions are not using these keywords, that means that you can easily replace a function expression with an arrow function expression. So that's the big thing. Now, moving on with that, so let's just understand the last piece. The last piece says these functions or these function expressions are best suited for non-method functions, and they cannot be used as constructors. So far we have not looked at constructors. So let's say another feature of JavaScript is constructors. We have not looked at that. So arrow functions are not suited for constructors, which we're going to look at in a future video, but they're also not suited for methods. And we already know what a method is. So if you go back to our documentation, we're going to go to our first page, and over here, a method, I'm going to zoom this in, scroll down, and it says a method is a key which has a function as a value in an object. So if an object has a function inside as a key, that's called a method. That's all it basically is saying. So it's not suited for that, because actually the reason for that is because usually a function, a method, actually uses the this keyword. So that's why it's actually kind of attached to this particular statement over here. So you may be asking, okay, so an arrow function has a lot of less functionality. That's true. Arrow function is simply a function with a lot of less functionality. But in most of the cases, we do not use these functionalities. We don't use the this keyword, argument, super, new target. We don't use constructors. So when you're not using all those features, then it's faster and simpler to write an arrow function. So many good use cases for an arrow function is actually a lot of callback functions. So let's say I'm going to scroll all the way up, and we know already about, let's say, document.add event listener, and we provide some kind of event, and then we provide a function like such, right? So in this case, instead of providing a function expression, which we are already doing over here, a good idea is to use the fat arrow function. So that's the good use case. Callback functions are used everywhere in JavaScript, and that's where you use it, as long as you don't use the this keyword, you don't use the arguments, you don't use the new target, you don't use it as a constructor. So that's pretty much it for this video. In the next video, in the future videos, we're gonna be using more and more of this, so you get a handle of it. Talk to you in the next lesson.